I was everyone's favorite morning radio personality. Then I got kidnapped. You're going to be the host of my horror anthology podcast. What? I can't do horror. I'm too cheerful and upbeat. I can fix that. And that's how I came to be your host. I'm maybe disembodied, but I'm still happy as Slocum. So sit back and let us invade your safe space. It's the Tales from My Box podcast. Discretion is advised. Welcome to the box. You are receiving the Tales from My Box podcast, transmitting from the Dingy Dungeon Studio somewhere in Washington State. Today's episode involves filth and squalor and one mean daddy. But our trigger warning is a serious one. No jokes involved. This story contains extreme domestic violence and listener discretion is highly advised. If you or anyone you know is experiencing domestic violence, there is help available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in any language. Call 800-799-7233. Again, that number is 800-799-7233. Jordan A. Thomas went dark for this one and is the only person responsible for Fustercluck. The thing you must know about my mother is that she was, at the core of her being, a truly meek and pious woman. She didn't drink, smoke, cuss, or even have so much as a cup of coffee. She was always frail and wispy, with a beauty you might miss if you were in a hurry, but couldn't help but appreciate in still moments. She was a dandelion bud of a woman, her bald head covered in a yellow rubber rain bonnet at all times. Never knew it to be unusual until I got older and noticed no one else wore such things. I only ever heard her raise her voice that one night when I was a child, and never since. I had opened my eyes in the middle of the night. Didn't hear nothing, but I knew something was wrong. Looking up at my spaceship mobile, hanging from the ceiling above the baby crib with the knocked out bars that couldn't contain my growing boy legs. This old crib is what I had to sleep on. I didn't know any different. The outside light leaked just enough through the black mold-lined window beside me for me to see around my room. My father had been a hoarder, and my room was filled with overflowing boxes of every plastic piece of trash you could imagine. Broken toys, newspapers, record albums, magazines, books, clothing, you name it. My father kept it. The piles rose well over my little head, and my mother told me every day not to knock anything over. I was used to sneaking out of my crib because of this. I knew how angry Daddy got when things got knocked over. I knew he'd take it out on my mother and not me. Creeping toward the door, I was almost too scared to move, but somehow driven forward despite my fear. As I got closer to the opening, I began to hear the faint, gaspy cries I knew so well. They were more intense than I'd ever heard before, and as I stepped past the threshold into the upstairs hall, I heard her pant out the term I had never heard before. Fustercluck. It's all a Fustercluck. I eased across the width of the cluttered hallway, lined with haphazardly stacked books that towered over me to get to the rail of the stairs. She was at the bottom, crumpled over a box of photos that I couldn't make out. Suddenly, she reared back with a thundering sob as she held up a single photo. "You're a Fustercluck." She started to get up with the picture in her hand, and I slumped back behind a stack of books. I listened and heard her heavy pants as she exited through the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. I don't know why I didn't run back into my bedroom and close my eyes until the sun came up. That had always worked in the past, when I had been scared, when my dad would come home angry. But this was something different. This was too serious to close my eyes. I was too curious about the photos at the bottom of the stairs. She had shown me the pictures before. I loved looking at them. Old photos of my mother when she was young. Pictures of the place she lived in Utah. The big family she had. The church she said they always went to. These photos were the only thing that survived the fire when her parents' house burnt down. That's when she met my dad, while they were staying at the church. There was only one picture of my dad that I ever saw. It was from their wedding and neither of them looked very happy. I think it was the last photo taken at that church before it burnt down. I made it down to the bottom of the stairs, eager to see the pictures of the family I had never met. Grandma, Grandpa, and all my aunts and uncles in Utah. Mom said we'd go see them someday, and that they'd really love having us around. I got to the bottom of the stairs and froze. I zeroed in on one of the dozens of Polaroids scattered around the cluttered living room. These weren't family photos. I broke my trance and eased closer to my target photo, knowing that image was not one I was supposed to be seeing. Picking up the photo, I understood a little why my mom had been so frazzled. The Polaroid was of a naked young woman who looked like she was asleep in a dark spot of grass underneath a tree. A scan of the nearby photos revealed them to be similar, either of the same young woman or different young women, all undressed. I wasn't supposed to be seeing this, and I was just about to go back upstairs and try shutting my eyes. This was before cell phones, so we only had the one landline in the kitchen, and when it rang, it rattled your eardrums. It was too late for anyone to be calling, except Daddy. The photo slipped from my hand. Daddy would not like to see these photos scattered about like this. This I was sure of. The phone rang again and again. I didn't know where my mom had gone, but it was clear she couldn't hear the phone ring. Daddy wouldn't like it if she didn't pick up the phone. The ringing stopped. I stepped toward the kitchen. Every inch of the kitchen was covered in dishes, some clean, some not. The garbage overflowed out of the wastebasket in the corner. Even at a young age, I knew there was something wrong with the way we were living. I didn't know what to do. Go outside and look for Mom, or go back to my little bed and pray for daylight to come. My heart went cold. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't allowed to answer the phone. But what if it was Daddy? I picked up the phone and put it to my ear. I could hear my father breathing on the other end. Deep breaths. I could smell his breath through the phone. Buddy, is that you? Yeah, I responded. I wasn't allowed to be answering the phone. Where's Mommy? She's outside. What's she doing out there? I don't know. She looked at your pictures and she ran outside. Pictures? The naked ladies. Silence. Seemed like it lasted for a long time. Go back to bed, son. It's way past your bedtime. That's what I wanted to hear. Somebody to tell me what the right thing to do was. Okay, Daddy. I hung up the phone and wondered why he hadn't asked to talk to Mommy. I stopped on my way back up the stairs and thought about it for a moment. Why hadn't he asked to talk to Mommy? I knew my mother was in trouble with Daddy, so as much as I wanted to go shut my eyes till dawn, I had to go warn her. Trying to run, but my little legs felt weak. I went outside into the damp February air. A single outdoor light gave just enough illumination to see the path toward the old woodshed, where I could hear my mother. I called out to her. She didn't answer. I could hear her talking to herself in her panicked tizzy voice. I called out to her again as I stepped off the porch and crossed the muddy driveway toward the rickety two-car shed. My mother was babbling all kinds of crazy talk I didn't understand. When I crept into the shed, I stood at the door and watched her fumbling through the trunk of my dad's old Plymouth Duster that nobody was supposed to touch. The rest of the shed looked the same as the house, only with car parts, RV parts, broken lawnmowers, weed eaters, and lumber with lots of nails sticking out everywhere. My dad used to tell me that he was going to fix up that old Duster, and me and him would go out riding in it some sunny summer day in the near future. But until then, I wasn't to go near it. Dad was not going to like Mom fiddling around with his Duster. I was just about to say something to get her attention when she came out from around the back of the car holding a long bone with some sort of a bracelet wrapped around the end of it. My eyes must have gone wide as she held the bracelet end of the bone up to the crappy shop light and held up the Polaroid in the opposite hand. She compared the two for a moment before she crumbled in place in a sobbing mass. That's it. That's it, she cried. I ran over to her, not wanting her to cry. She recoiled as she saw me for a moment before simply surrendering to my hug. She cried deep, helpless sobs of anguish. I looked down at the Polaroid in her hand and immediately saw the bracelet on the naked lady's ankle. I knew it was the same one on the end of the bone she was holding. The lady in the Polaroid was bones now, and her bones were in the trunk of my dad's old duster. Headlights flashed across the dusty walls through the broken boards holding the shed together. My mother gripped me tight and muffled her cries into my chest as Daddy's old Ford pickup truck rumbled down our driveway and came to a stop in front of the shed. My mother's arm tightened around me to the point of discomfort. Her face contorted as she forced words out. "Stay by me." My dad slammed the truck door shut, and I watched his shadow ease across the ground in a slow, deliberate approach. My mother released me, and I stepped behind her as she reached over to the wall and grabbed a weed whacker off a rusted nail. Barely strong enough to hold it upright, she inhaled several deep breaths to muster strength for an attack. Dad's shadowy figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by porch light. His face, too darkened for me to make out any expression. A strange, chemical smell that I've never been able to recognize wafted in behind him and mixed with the stench of the generic cigarette cherrying in his mouth. Smoke poured from his nose like steam from a cartoon bull before he flicked the cigarette butt and descended upon us. "Stay back!" my mother mouthed out as she pulled the weed whacker up as high as she could. Without so much as a word, my father grabbed that weed whacker out of her hands before she could swing it. My mother reared back. She was shaking so bad it looked like she might fall. Daddy turned from her and placed his weed whacker back on its nail before shifting his focus to me. "No, please," was all Mama could force out as he extended his hand for me to take. My father was a graven image of a World War II veteran, ripped from the celluloid background of some John Wayne film. I was always a little mesmerized by his classic features that shadows just seemed to cling to. A trace of porch light lit the glass eye in his left socket, so much you could see the hollowness within him. It was an old injury that I never learned the origins of. His one physical flaw, an everyday reminder of his imperfection. Eyes wide, I stepped out from behind Mama. Daddy was telling me to come to him the same way he always did, without saying a word. Mama threw out her arm to block me from going to him, and he hit her. And it was the hardest I ever seen someone get hit in real life. It was so fast, close-fisted. I thought he killed her. Mama's body just crumpled in place, and I don't remember the next few moments. I just stood there. I stood there until Daddy told me to move. Then I did what Daddy said. Daddy told me to. I don't remember coming back into the house. It was like one moment I was staring down at my mother crumpled against Daddy's duster, and the next, I was looking down on the pile of Polaroids of naked women surrounding the box my dad kept the camera in. My father knelt down beside me and held up a photo of a naked redhead for me to see. He gave me the oddest look as he made eye contact and adopted a fatherly tone of voice I didn't hear much of. The kind of voice a dad uses when he's trying to teach his son. "She's pretty, huh?" I nodded. She was. "You like looking at these pictures?" "Because I don't mind if you do." "It's only natural for a boy." I nodded again. I figured that's what he wanted me to do. I wanted to ask if she was dead, but I couldn't tell how he would react. "I think it's time we took that duster out for a drive. Sound like fun?" "It's just gonna be you and me for a while, champ. We're gonna have to look out for each other." I asked about Mama, and he just gave me a sorrowful expression. "We're gonna get you a new mommy. A real pretty one. One that still has her hair. I know someone who can't wait to be your new mommy. You're gonna love her." I don't know if I said anything or not. I just couldn't process the idea of having a new mom. He waved the photo of the naked redhead in his hand. "Someday, you might want to know about this, and I'll explain it. I'll teach you all about it, and you'll understand. I'll teach you everything." Flash. The Polaroid went off in the box by itself. First time I ever saw my father look less than confident. A plain white photo scrolled out of the camera, not yet developed. My father picked up the Polaroid and looked it over, not knowing what to make of it. "Old camera," he said. "Must be defective." I could see the photo in his hand beginning to fade in, a black background. He turned to me and told me to get up to my room and go to sleep, and no matter what I heard, to not come back down until he came to get me in the morning. A warm breeze flowed through the living room, causing several stacks of paper to scatter. Even at my young age, I knew this wasn't normal. My father looked shaken. An explosion from outside shook the house around us. A bright wash of yellow light poured in from the kitchen window. He glanced down at the photo in his hand and froze. The Polaroid faded into the figure of my mother staring straight into the camera with her rubber bonnet off. Sweat washed down her hairless, razor-scarred head. Daddy's duster engulfed in flames behind her. She was a dandelion ready to blossom. "Go to your room," Daddy yelled. To this day, I don't know if my response was real or I imagined it over the years. But I didn't go up to my room. "No," I said with a defiance I could not imagine. Didn't look like my father could have imagined it either. His face morphed from surprise to hardened anger, and I'm sure he would have hit me if the Polaroid of Mom in his hands hadn't burst into flames at that exact moment. Daddy dropped the photo just as the rest of the scattered photos in the box spontaneously combusted. He made a strange barking noise that I'd never heard before or since, before retreating into the bedroom. A stack of boxes against the wall behind me combusted with a whoosh, and flames shot up into the air and bounced off the ceiling. Daddy came out of the bedroom holding one of his guns. He was going to kill her. I knew it. He was going to kill her. Every drawer in the kitchen flew open and all the contents shot out in a haphazard stream of airspace into the kitchen. I couldn't let Daddy kill her. A box next to him combusted with a boom. I leapt at my daddy as he recoiled from the blast and grabbed the wrist of his gun hand. Several more explosions went off around us. I yelled for Daddy to stop, but he threw me into the wall next to us. I hit so hard, but I didn't black out. I looked up at my father. The entire house was engulfed in flames, and he held that gun of his to my head. Flashes of firelight illuminated the hollowness of his glass eye. I stared into that prosthetic and back into his good eye, and I saw nothing in neither. My own father was going to kill me. Fustercluck. The word came out as a command through Mama's voice from outside my peripheral vision. And that gun melted in Daddy's hand, and he shrilled out a cry of pain as a slag encased his fingers. Fustercluck, she repeated with a cold, calculated dictation. Daddy's hair burst into flames, and he dropped to his knees as he tried to pat out the fire with his opposite hand. I turned to see my mother standing in the kitchen, surrounded by flames and floating kitchen utensils. She was a monster. No other way to put it. I was the child of monsters. I didn't hold my gaze. I couldn't see my mother like that. Fustercluck, came the next incantation. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't turn away either. Father reached out to me as his lower back arched him upright toward the sky. His jaw locked in agony. He looked directly at me in a last gasping plea for help before his glass eye burst inside his head. In memory, I see the fire coming through him from the back of his head just before it shot out both his eye sockets. He was hollow no more. In his last moments, he was filled with the very fire he kindled. It burnt for only a few seconds before disappearing completely in a sudden draft, and the old man collapsed face first to the floor in front of me. I was afraid to face my mother. She had always loved me. But was that even my mother anymore? The house had settled into a steady inferno. No more violent surges were coming. Everything would come down, but in its own time. I finally looked back at my mother, who held her rubber bonnet out for me to see. Her eyes were wide and friendly. She placed her bonnet back over her head in an exaggerated gesture to let me know that everything was going to be all right. I can't say right here that I knew it to be true. Just didn't have any other options. Walking over to her through the flames may have been the hardest trek I've ever made. But when I reached her and she knelt down to embrace me, it was just Mama again. She drove us out of there that night in Daddy's truck. Life got better, more normal. Never saw the monster in her again. And she never saw the monster in me. I kept it a secret until after she died. Because part of me knows that I'm way more like my father than I'd ever want her to know.
Don't you just love a happy ending? This is why you meet first dates in public places that are well lit. Because those kind of emotional scars glow in the dark. I'd like to tell you that it gets lighter from here, but we're in the dark part of the season, so you might want to hug a puppy before continuing. Maybe you need a break and would rather listen to blood-sucking vampires instead. Well, you're in luck. Jordan A. Thomas's debut audiobook, Coronation, is available everywhere audiobooks are sold, and at a great price. You can get a copy for less than the price of one credit on Audible, and you can get it without feeding the Bezos. Until next time, don't open the box.
Keegan, Chapter 18. I know all about cars, but I've never experienced one until now. The heavy equipment we use for the temple, loaders, backhoes, and a couple of flatbed pickup trucks gave me plenty of experience behind the wheel. Never at this speed, though. We're shooting down the desert road with the speedometer pinned at 120 miles per hour. It's an insane speed and I'm not in control of it. Dash lights cast weird shadows over the face of the most gauntly-looking human I've ever encountered. Poke has the wheel and my life in his hands. It's horrifying and exhilarating at the same time. A wire spring in the back of my seat has popped out of place, and I can't seem to shift into a position where it isn't sticking me in the back. A smell of old cigarillos makes me hold my breath for long periods while Poke drones on and on about his life story and the vampire hunting business. What I've learned so far. If you sever a vampire's head clean off the neck, the head will remain preserved and you can turn it in at a clearinghouse and collect a bounty. However, if the head does not come off clean, everything will turn to ash and you put your life in danger for nothing.
I met an Australian fella named Michael Kelly. He was doing trick boomerang shows with a carnival I fell in with after my whore of a mother kicked me out of the house. We got to talking about the occult, and since my whore of a mother was all into that shit since the time I can remember, I kept up in conversation with him. Must have liked me some because he took me under his wing and taught me everything he knew about boomerangs. Once I started hunting vampires, I made sassy here.
He taps his jade boomerang with his bony finger. He has the damn thing mounted on his dashboard, as if we might have to battle a vampire while going 120 miles per hour.
Kind of a tribute to the master.
Poke chatters non-stop for an hour. The calf muscles in my leg begin to cramp up from the nervous contractions I'm making. We can see maybe 20 feet in front of us. Anything appearing in the road becomes instant death. But Poke seems unfazed by it all. He keeps talking and talking.
I rode solo for a long time until I met my wife, Trudy Mayflower, the love of my life. We were both trying to collect a bounty on Adam Silverspike. He was a famous first-generation ghoulie, older than the Bible. Silverspike was about to split my dome with some ancient battle axe when Trudy came up behind him and rolled his head. Saved my life. We never left each other's side until the day she died.
He's making me think of Lexi right now. We spent all our lives together, and when it came down to it, she'd rather stay in our little village and die than run off with me. I'll get over her. Plenty of girls my age in the city of Provo. That's where Poke says we're going to turn in the bounty on the Sentinel's head.
My love is vengeance now. Went off and got hooked up with some junkies in Seattle. Got myself a blood disease that'll ash up even the most purebred creature of the night.
Poke adopted vampire hunting as his life's calling one day on the set of Battle in the Bush, a B-grade movie about Australian cowboys. The film crew turned into a bunch of hungry vampires and began snacking on all the pretty actors during the film's wrap party. Poke made it out with 5 heads and a new career. Or so he says. Where are we going? I ask. Poke shuts up. He stops gabbing on a dime. I wish I had asked an hour ago. My appreciation for his silence lasts a couple of minutes before it gets creepy. I look over at him, and he smiles at me.
We're going to see that pretty face of yours in action,
he tells me. I hope I'm wrong about his meaning. A flash of a human form out the corner of my eye, and in a split second, he's clipped off the passenger side corner of the van. Poke keeps the gas pedal down without a second thought to the person he just hit. I look up in the rearview mirror and watch as the guy laying in the road gets to his feet and starts walking down the road as if nothing happened.
He's dead already, kid. Don't give him a second thought. There are plenty of them waiting for you.
As the words leave his lips, another figure appears off the side of the road in Poke's headlights. We shoot past him. Even at high speed, I'm able to see the dead look on his face. Vampires? I ask.
Mongrels. Vampire breeding has to this point in history been selective. Humans with a very particular genetic coding were considered candidates. You just saw what happens when a human without the vampire gene gets turned. Someone I know is building an army of them.
What does that have to do with me? I inquire.
You are going to fight them,
he informs me. A mob of mongrel vampires appears in the roadway at the edge of Poke's headlights. He lets his foot off the gas, but it's too late to keep us from slamming into the crowd. The cracking of bones on the tires and thudding of bodies hitting the side of the van create an unnatural rhythm. Poke hangs onto the steering wheel as the bodies veer us from one side of the road to the other. He lets out a howl of laughter as a vampire dressed in a 3-piece suit disappears under his tire.
You want to know how my old man taught me how to swim?
No, I say.
Cocksucker took me out to the lake and walked me to the end of the dock.
He looks down at me and tells me to kick if I want to live. The van skids to a stop, and the writhing vampires engulf us, well aware of our presence. What does that mean? I blurt out as a once attractive woman in tattered clothes bares her fangs at me through the window. I know. I mean, who says that to a kid? Long story short, he tossed my ass in. And I swear I ain't shitting you here. I went out of body. Like I could see myself drowning in the nasty water with the algae and the fish shit. But I could hear my old man's voice yelling at me through the water. Kick! 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 I'm listening, but I'm fixed on a long-haired Asian vampire smashing his fist into the windows far too many times to leave his hand intact. What you getting at, sir? I don't want to know the answer. He reaches over and grabs Sassy off the dashboard with a wild gleam in his eyes and a giddy chuckle in his speech. Kick or die, buckwheat! I see him hit the electric window controls on the driver's side console. Stop! Don't! Are you crazy? The window retracts, and I'm stabbing vampires before it's halfway down. Why are you doing this? I yell. I'm terrified. For the first time in my life, survival is in question. Shut up and kick! He claps back. No choice. Right foot back to my chest as I pivot in my seat and kick the door with everything I've got. The door flies open. I'm out of the van and striking faster than a bad memory. Nothing else matters at this moment. In my zone, practicing my religion. Working. Haven't felt like this since... I can't remember. Got a task. Kill vamps. Apply my systematic method of obliteration upon their punk asses. I'm swatting heads off the undead like it's a new dance craze. I glance back at Poke on the opposite side of the van. He's got his boomerang in his hand, and he's fighting off the monsters as if born to do so. I'm not scared. This feels like home. I spear a skinny vamp with an afro through the heart as he dives off the top of the van and toss him into a crowd of bloodsuckers surrounding me before slashing the necks of two vamps behind me on the counterswing. A quick pivot sees my blade across the top of a charging vamp's forehead. The top of his head comes off, but the damn thing still stands. Over at the van, Poke hangs back in the driver's seat, smoking his cigarillo, watching me fight. Okay, kid, quit showing off and get in the van. As he pulls away, I skip out of the diving grab of a vamp in a biker jacket and slash my way past a hissing soccer mom, diving into the passenger seat in full stride before chest kicking the old man who dove in after me. Poke hits the gas and mows down a line of bloodsuckers. He looks over at me with the most serious expression. You know, you have a moral obligation to use your fighting skills to help your fellow humans survive this ghoulie epidemic. Epidemic? No one believed these things existed until a year ago. A couple of online videos surface here and there. Unexplained murders in the thousands sweep the nation, and it has become quite apparent to the people of the world my life's work was always justifiable and important. I do believe myself a chosen one of sorts, and I would like to extend the invitation to you to join me. He nudges the steering wheel to clip a vamp with the corner of the van. I don't owe anybody anything, I reply. Silence. Seems like a full minute. Disappointing, Poke deadpans. You can make a buttload of money. He gestures to the head of the village sentinel perched on the console between us. This guy is rare. He'll fetch a couple grand easy. I'm going to take you to Provo. You'll see how bad it is. If you want to collect this bounty with me, I'll be happy to give you a cut. You kind of helped. How did you know where to take me to fight the vampires? Poke takes a long drag off his cigarillo and thinks well before he speaks. The thought process shows in his face. He's weighing all the angles to decide whether it's a good idea to tell me or not. They seem to be migrating toward your village.